Welcome to the GOAT podcasts, where we discuss health, integrative health, exercise, and well being. Our guest today is Dr. Anne Mustafa, a licensed psychologist based in Bahrain and founder of Balance Counseling Clinic, with over 30 years of experience supporting people with mental health challenges. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Anne.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Our topic today is a little bit, it's just, we mention it every day and we talk about it, but we don't truly know the meaning of it, and it's anxiety.
Oh boy. Okay, that's a complicated one.
Is it?
It is. It is. I guess I would describe it as a feeling of being scared that lingers and kind of expands, like tree branches. So it goes into all kinds of what if scenarios. So first it starts with your brain kind of thinking, oh, there could be something wrong. And then it starts thinking, well, what if this happens? And then what if this and that happens? And then what if this and this and that happens? And then it goes into this giant tree like structure of worries. So from one worry, it becomes multiplied exponentially. And then the fear multiplies exponentially as well. So it makes you feel like you're running away from, that you need to run away physically from something really properly scary.
And would it have like actual symptoms on our bodies?
Yeah, it has a fight or flight response, and that like increases your heart rate, makes you need to go to the bathroom pretty quick because I guess the body's getting rid of
Oh,
everything, every extra weight it's got, and it's ready to flee. So it has a whole bunch of physical symptoms that are really uncomfortable, like rapid heartbeat, sweating, cold hands, and it's the stuff that I guess you would have before a presentation in college
right.
or school.
Yeah.
But I guess what we're not taught is we're not taught to move while we're having it. We're taught to sit it through.
Yeah.
So we're giving our body the wrong idea. So while we're sitting it through, we're telling our body that you can't escape this, even though you physically feel the need to. So it's kind of counterintuitive in a way.
Yeah.
Because what we should do is actually get up and move and walk around.
So sometimes we mistake anxiety with worry and stress.
Okay, the idea is that worry is a rational thing, right? So, like, say that I'm not sure if I locked the door and then I leave and I'm kind of like, maybe I should go check. That's a worry. Worry is like more within reason, right? More like, oh, I wonder how I did on my exam. Just occupies like a few seconds of your brain concerning itself with something. Anxiety is amplified a lot. So there is a significant difference.
Does anxiety lead to panic attacks at a certain point?
It can, because it triggers this autonomic activation, right? Fight or flight.
Right.
And then with that, it can lead to a panic attack. Because when it grows and grows into this tree-like thing of what if this and this and this and that, and at some point you've created such a thing that is untenable and unfixable in your mind that at that point, you know, and you can't flee, right? Because it's all thoughts. So it's one thought and another thought and another thought and a hypothetical scenario in your mind, and there's no fleeing from it.
Yeah.
So then, you start getting all these, palpitations and sweating and this, and then you're sitting there and you're like, on top of all the other what ifs, what if I die? So then it's like, yeah, that's like the epitome. It's like the
Right.
top of the pyramid of worries. It's like, that's it. And then the panic, and then the person starts saying, oh, my breathing. Oh, maybe it's a heart attack. Oh, well, I'm really
Right.
uncomfortable. So it's like, let's say, the culmination
Yeah.
of anxiety is a panic
Yeah.
attack.
Do you think that anxiety comes from childhood, or is it something that we can get any time throughout
Oh,
our
that's
lifespan?
interesting. I think in childhood, we need to feel safe. So that's really important that our parents help us feel safe in the world as little kids, right? Because you don't want to trigger these reactions of fear or unsafety too often. So if you trigger them too often in a kid, and the kid maybe has an anxious disposition anyway. So you escalate that. And you could think of it like a workout,
Hmm.
right? It's like you lift weights. Well, let's say you go through this anxiety cycle over and over and over again until it becomes so fast
Yeah.
and so habituated that you start, people present to me and they're like, I'm worried, I'm anxious. I'm like, okay, well, what do you worry about? I don't know.
Hmm.
Well, I feel tense and I feel nervous. What are you concerned about? I don't know. And that's called free floating anxiety because it's not anymore attached to a thought.
Yeah.
So now the part of your brain that is like trying to flee from danger is activating by itself because it's used to being turned on. So it like looks around and it's like, I don't see anything scary, but there must be. Let me let me prepare myself to run just in case.
Yeah.
So it's from a perpetual threat, I guess you could say, continuous concern and worry.
Yeah.
And there are more high strung individuals. Some people are different than others, right? And those kids need to feel more secure and maybe need less punitive parenting. So that kid needs reassurance. If he gets a bad grade and he's in grade
Oh,
2, you
right.
don't yell at him. You're like, oh, bud, okay, try harder next time.
Yeah. And do you find people with anxiety comfortable in that zone? That they sometimes don't want to step out of it because it became the familiar?
Well, I wouldn't say it's deliberate. It's that free floating anxiety I was telling you about. It's not deliberate. It's conditioning. It's like a workout, you know?
Yeah.
Once you work out or like you run 3K and 3K becomes a comfortable run. So they establish themselves at a baseline of continuous, vigilance.
Yeah.
And then there's things like PTSD that trigger, immediately.
Do you think that people who are anxious are usually tired all the time? Oh, to the effect.
Eventually they are because think about it, your adrenal gland triggers this response, which triggers cortisol, right?
Right.
Which is part of the
Absolutely.
fear response. So all that cortisol is going to gather up. So they sweat a lot and they get swollen a little bit.
Yeah.
And cortisol affects your immune system because it suppresses it. So you get colds easier. I mean, we're not meant to live in a continuous state of turmoil and fear. So it would decompensate their physical health. Definitely.
And what are the most, let's say, popular strategies that you recommend people with anxiety to follow, let's say?
Well, if they're men, the research says that they should get exercise, and that's like a great way to just get it out. Another thing I would suggest someone is not to sit. So even if they're in a doctor's office pre-procedure or they're
Mm.
scared, I would recommend that they get up and walk around every few minutes and not just sit with the feeling like we're taught. Um, there are other things you can do. Um, One thing I guess would be if there's a traumatic event, that person or that group of people needs a debriefing within the first 72 hours. Because otherwise it starts to create patterns in the mind of the person.
Mm.
And that would lead to PTSD like symptoms. So
Do you think it's important to seek professional help when a person suffers from anxiety and it's just, let's say, first stage?
I think the sooner a person gets help, the faster we can fix it. Firstly. Secondly, we can teach them coping strategies. I think that I mean, if I had a kid that had test anxiety that I thought was pestering him and not allowing him to be okay with himself, that I would take action quickly
Right.
because it affects your physical health, it affects your immune system, it affects your reactivity to stress later on. So, and say that a person is just high strung by nature. Some people are just, part of it's hereditary. So, some people are more anxious by nature. We want to help them develop strategies to deal with it.
Are you a big fan of making diet changes to people who are like, let's say, suffer from anxiety?
I'd look at what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. I'd look at what their age is. It's like my dad's 91, okay? He wants to go and eat carbs. That makes him happy. let him go, you know?
Right.
I don't believe in making dietary changes that are so drastic that they're unsustainable. I don't believe in making dietary changes that might compromise a person's well being mentally. I mean, if this is what they're used to eating
Right.
and they're at a time in their life where they don't need to compromise, then okay. I would advise kids, especially ones with anxiety, to curb the sugars, to curb the dyes, the reds, the blues, the yellows, Skittles, which my son purchased the other day. I was like, Bud, there's it's like these crushed insects that go into making the red dye. And I showed
Oh,
it to him and he's like, yeah, but I really want them. I'm like, okay, but there's bugs in there and they're crushed and they made a color. You know that, right? And he's like, yep. I'm like, okay, go for it.
I think the taste is just
I don't believe in strict limitation
right.
and bypassing a person's will. So, yeah, I mean, if he's making an informed decision, okay. If he wants to have a Coke, he's 15 years old. Well, do I think he should? Probably not. Does he want it? I'll offer him orange juice, and if he, or lemonade, and if he doesn't want it, go for it.
Right. And does an anxiety usually is it associated with depression or are they
Can be.
completely
It's the
different?
decompensated anxiety after you've sat in it long enough,
Right.
right? And the cortisol's been released, and the adrenal glands kind of going ew, and he's exhausted. Then the person is like, I can't run from this, whatever it is. I can't get out of it. I'm stuck.
Hmm.
And then he's upset because he's exhausted, and part of the thing with anxiety is you wake up at 3 in the morning from the cortisol. So, you can't sleep, you go to sleep, you wake up at 3, you're sitting there, all the thoughts come back at 3 in the morning for a good hour and a half.
Right.
It's difficult. So, yeah, I mean, there is problems that come with it.
With all this, like, of course, the world has changed, with technology and social media and many other factors that can cause us anxiety. What are the like main, let's say, causes for it nowadays that you see a lot here in your clinic
Well, in my clinic.
or in our
Okay, well,
community at
I'll
the
tell you.
time?
Okay, well, there's some studies that say that the blue light from the screens is
Oh,
affecting, yeah, and that's why they chose blue. So that's very interesting. You can go conspiracy theorize there. Um, with In my clinic, I would find anxiety from testing, anxiety from transitions in life, difficulty adjusting to a marriage, to a divorce, to adding members to your family, to death. Pretty much life changes bring anxiety,
right.
and that's what brings people here. Um, difficulties in college, difficulties living alone after you've graduated from high school and you've gone away, those kind of things. Parenting sometimes, high strung parents anxious that they're
Hmm.
doing the wrong thing. Okay, those are pretty much it. The people that have
Yeah.
been diagnosed with cancers and
Oh,
chronic
right.
conditions, that too.
And is it hereditary in your opinion?
Anxiety?
Yeah.
Well, the part of it is called vicarious learning, which is how sometimes, kids get scared of spiders because their mom's scared. So you see anxious people. They go into a ruminating. Oh, well, he said this, and then 15 minutes later, he said this, repeating, ruminating the same thought over and over. That's anxiety inducing. Admonishing kids for bad grades repeatedly or putting a standard that's not realistic, you know? Kid's gonna get a C once in a while. He'll get an F here and there. He'll go and he'll not do his homework sporadically. Okay, he learns, right? As parents, we don't need to prevent him from learning or to not allow him to fail. Let him fail once.
Right. I don't know if you want me to ask this question or if it will sound wrong, we'll just like
Go ahead.
with some, let's say, diseases,
Yeah,
when it's genetic,
yeah.
we can switch off the gene, let's say, for that
Oh,
specific.
there's a very interesting technology now. They're using fMRI to switch off parts of the amygdala.
What's fMRI?
Functional MRI.
Ah,
So it looks at which parts of the brain are activated by different scenarios, and that's something that we're working on bringing to Bahrain
oh
pretty
wow,
soon.
that's very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's new ways of managing, like accessing control and
Right,
enabling the person to control the part of their brain that gets activated when during PTSD or fear. Yeah.
right.
So there's a lot of stuff going on. There's supplements that people are using. Some hypotheses about the inability of the anxious person to methylate certain compounds.
Oh,
So, like if they're given folic acid, we would switch it to methylfolate. There's a lot of stuff out there. A lot.
you spoke about supplements. Do you think vitamin D deficiency can
I
be a reason for anxiety?
Well, I think it could be a contributing factor.
Right,
And I can't imagine why anyone would not cover all the biological factors as well. So, like sometimes in the clinic, I'll send them and I'll be like, okay, let's check vitamin B, vitamin D. Let's see what's going on. Check a thyroid. Thyroid can be a good cause of anxiety as well. So there's biological factors that can be, you know, adding to it. So those need to be addressed. Because why would I keep someone here for 6 months if it's a physical issue? It's a thyroid, then I'd be harming them.
right. You know, when it comes to mental health, there are so many issues that people are ashamed from and from, like, let's say, telling their friends and family about them.
It's so sad because, part of it isn't every religion, I suppose. People talk about that some mental health issues are a lack of faith,
Right.
and that's not really fair,
Yeah.
right? I know it's in your mind and I know it's in your head, but would you treat cancer by telling someone go pray? No, you do both. You can go
Yes.
pray, which is absolutely sensible, and leave it to God if it's too big for you, but you got to do your due diligence, right? And same with us, in psychology or psychiatry or medicine, we still have to do the same thing. We still need to check and we still need to optimize the physical parts.
Right.
And that doesn't mean dismissing religion entirely, but it also means integrating other things, right?
So I believe that the role of family is very important, but how would you help someone that doesn't have that kind of support at home or at, let's say, work, for example?
We take pro bono cases quite frequently in our clinic. We're training two people who are doing their PhD thesis now, so we take cases for free sometimes. Um, we do podcasts like this one. Um, we are open to someone sending us a text or an email asking us a question. We'll be happy to answer back. It's our way of giving back to the community in whichever way we can. Um, I think there needs to be a lot more um, mental health services available to people, and that is something that I think we need to work on locally.
Right.
Definitely.
Um, we spoke about anxiety and how it can lead to sometimes depression. What's your view on burnout?
Um, well, burnout's very interesting. Um, Part of me thinks it has to do with a very strict management style that reminds the staff of their parents. So sometimes, especially out here, management can be really tough, and they don't give credit where credit is due, and they're implementing an Asian Toyota style to kind of continuous improvement measures, right? And I don't know, from a psychological standpoint, I'm all about continuous improvement in students and people and in professionals as well. But I also think that needs to be done in a way where the effort is rewarded and the staff feels useful and that they're contributing to something rather than just trudging along, and that they're of no significance and that their work doesn't matter. So I think that's, let's say, a factor that would induce burnout.
Yeah. But don't you think that organizations or, for example, corporates need to be educated about this part?
Absolutely.
Do you see that it's happening here in the region?
Sometimes I've seen some initiatives in places like BEPCO, and I've seen initiatives in some universities, AGU, ISEC, the Society of Students had done some stuff. Yeah, big companies, small companies, not so much. And I think small companies also need to support each other and have more of a family atmosphere that's humane and that understands the other person's point of view. Because in a smaller setting, the work is less specialized and more distributed. Maybe the hours are longer. So in those environments, they need to support each other just as they would in a family.
Right. With many of the corporate wellness programs that
Mhm.
many of the corporates do nowadays,
It's better than nothing.
right? But sometimes they focus so much on the physical, like on exercise, on dieting, and they completely ignore the mental health. Isn't that the HR's
I
job to
think
do?
HR is not equipped or trained to deal with mental health issues. I think HR is aimed at productivity very frequently and getting the right person in the right job. But I don't know how much they're taught to look at problems and to take people who are in a state of conflict in their department and transfer them. I don't really know.
Do you think it's important for HRs to,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think they need to be able to identify a problem and refer that out when it needs to be referred out. Um, IKEA also had a mental health uh, education seminar a few years ago here in Bahrain. Um, I think it's really important. I think it's important in university settings where people are under pressure, students, they need a lot of support, and it can be because imagine that person just doesn't just have to reckon with the fact that he may be failing university, but he also has to contend with his family and the bills of it, and it's a sticky
yeah.
situation.
Uh, so therapy versus medication. Which one would you recommend and when?
Okay. Uh, what's the time frame? That's the question I would ask, because let's say that somebody has an exam in 2 weeks
Oh, okay.
or 2 months,
Right.
and it's a big exam, like a medical licensing exam, and they're depressed and they're scared. I would say medication, sure. Short term, quick, and the person's able to continue on with what they have to do. Um, and it's a short term situational problem, right?
Yeah.
Situation
Yeah.
passes after that. Long term problems, like I've been anxious or I've been depressed since I was 6, and I can't get over it, and I'm now, 35, and I'm not feeling good, and I can't get out of bed, and I can't function. Both.
Hmm.
The reason being that you want to treat the severity of the symptom, and you also want to teach the person to do things differently. So I believe in therapy, definitely. I believe in counseling. I believe in making life changes and adapting lifestyles and, optimizing the biology of the contributing factors. Um, but I believe in medication for short term solutions. And I think that
Yeah.
psychiatrists and psychologists need to work together
Right.
in a multidisciplinary approach where they refer back to each other and explain and discuss and treat the person together.
Right.
And that's something that's not happening very often here.
One of the things or subjects that I've heard so many people talk about is how you become dependent on drugs and or medication, for example. And that's why they're scared to take that step of being on medication.
Because there's no therapy provided in those cases, right? They're like, oh, you're not feeling good. Here, take some Cipralex. Did you check him? No. Did you give him a paper based test? No. How do you know? Okay, he looked depressed. I'm sure maybe he was. Okay, what are the reasons contributing to his depression? Right? Has he been diagnosed with a terminal cancer? Continue the medication and give him some counseling as well for end of life, right? If somebody crashed his car and he needs 2 doses of Xanax to stop shivering, well, okay, go get the 2 doses of Xanax to stop shivering, and then we can look at
Right.
what's coming. So there is no dependence per se. What happens with a dependence is we put a pill and we don't do anything to change anything.
Right.
So surely after 2 years of continuing on a medication when we've changed nothing, the symptoms will come back. Does that mean that the medication is addictive? No, that means that we didn't change the problem. If I have a toothache,
Oh, that's very interesting.
right? And I take Panadol, it doesn't hurt anymore.
Mm.
Okay. Well, did I fix the tooth? No. It's okay. I stop the Panadol, toothache comes back. Same thing. No different.
Makes sense. Where does the hormonal imbalances stand in all of this?
Oh, fabulous. They come around my age.
26?
Yeah, right. I think around perimenopause, it gets a little rough for women.
Hmm.
Um, the anxiety kicks in that is hormonally induced.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yes. So we get some anxiety, and we get a little short tempered,
Hmm.
and we get tired, and we're not the same people we were hormonally, physically, right? And that creates some issues. Now, what people are doing in other parts of the world is they're conducting um, sequential urine tests in a test called Dutch
Right.
that looks at the hormones throughout a time. Because what happens if you go and take a blood test, it shows you in that moment, but the next moment might change because the hormones aren't steady in that age, right?
Right.
So you need to do a test that will give you a proper picture of where the hormones are at. And then you need to decide, which is an interesting decision, right? Because people will tell you, well, you can get breast cancer, you can get uterine cancer if you take supplements. True. Take estrogen or progesterone or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
You can have other side effects. True. Does anyone telling you that you're going to lose bone density and have mood swings and have all kinds of other stuff? No. So
Yeah.
that's not really fair.
Right.
Um, in those cases, I think once we reach a certain age, we need to make an informed decision. And I think our gynecologists need to allow us the freedom to decide how we want to age. So I think that's important. And I think that is a very personal decision. And it depends on the responsibilities you have, right? I had 5 kids. I have one that's 16. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, well, it's time for me to go. I am a grandma too. Time for me to become the grandma that crochets. Well, no, not now.
Right.
So I would tend to go with the hormonal
Right.
supplement. Just, it depends on what your life requires of you
Right.
and what you want from yourself and what risks you're willing to take. You can decide to take statins or not.
Hmm.
So those are very personal decisions, and I think once you reach a certain age, you realize it's a trade-off.
Hmm.
And how you choose to trade off and what you're willing to lose and what you're willing to gain should be up to you as the patient, as a person. I think that's a very personal decision.
Right. And one more last question. Do you see anxiety or depression, let's say, or maybe both, mostly in men or women?
Well, I think women would be more willing to come forward.
Right.
Statistically and research wise, women have more negative feelings than men, not protected by testosterone, so maybe we're more sensitive. And as we age, again, the hormones do all kinds of wobbly things to us.
Right.
Um, I would say I see more women with less severe or dangerous mental health issues. And when I see a man, I need to pay extra attention.
Hmm.
What brings him here? Sometimes they minimize their symptoms in a very stoic way.
Right.
I'm okay, doc. I just don't feel real good these days, or my back hurts. Hmm. And I think we were taught in grad school that when they come in with a backache, then you need to look for depression, because they're masking symptoms, or they come in with anger,
Yeah.
right? I'm an angry guy and I get this and that. And then you're pretty sure this guy's depressed,
Hmm.
especially the military ones, because they're taught to take their fear and turn it into anger. And if
Right.
you've been taught that in the military for 15 or 20 years, that's what you're going to do. So that needs undoing.
Is there any advice that you'd like to add?
I think people should not be so hard on themselves. Like, literally, not be so hard on themselves. And it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be mad, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to be frustrated. These are all human things. I don't know why we need to block them out and attribute them to a lack of faith, or attribute them to, you know, being dramatic. No, that's how a person feels, and some people feel more than others. Some people are more sensitive than others, and that's how they're made. So we need to respect that not everyone reacts the same way. Just like we don't react the same way to food. Somebody can eat something and it doesn't make them sick. Another person eats it and
Absolutely. Yeah.
he's not okay afterwards. So I guess my take would be to be a little compassionate with our kids, with our staff, just with people in general.
Thank you, Dr. Ann, for being here on the Good Podcast.
It was my pleasure.
And where can we find you?
Balancecounseling.bh.
That's on Instagram.
Yeah. And we're located in the United Tower, which is part of Wyndham Grand in Bahrain Bay.
Awesome.
And we're pretty easy to find.
Thank you.
Thank you.